account, are you morally wrong to do so? The Treasury Minister, David Gauke, says you are, because you could be helping a tradesman avoid paying tax. He says the cash practice comes at a big cost to the Treasury. Let's speak to our finance expert, Roddy Cohn. Actually, Roddy, when you look at this, actually, it's not actually tax avoidance here, it's more tax evasion, which is illegal.
You know what, Phil? I think, as usual with these things, you've got to ask yourself what's behind the headlines. And clearly, we're in this period of austerity where the government have made it clear that after stories like the Jimmy Carr situation, they want to try and keep targeting more and more tax. And as I've often said in the past, Phil, what we should all be equally, if not more, concerned with is how that tax is spent. Because, if money gets squandered in the system, and I'm sure there's almost as much evidence for that as there might be for people who are being paid cash, then that is just as immoral.
Yes, there is, I understand, an aircraft carrier that will be paid for by the taxpayer we'll never use.
I mean, and you've got to ask yourself, this is, the problem with all these moral issues, and increasingly so. I think Paddy Ashdown, the Liberal Democrat MP, said we've turned moralising in Britain into a precise art. And I thought it was a very clever comment of his. I guess he also was a victim of it many years ago himself. But at the heart of it, I think the problem is that clearly, in general, our politicians are not inspiring confidence. Our tax system is overtly complex, and consequently, people, when they choose to make these decisions about whether to pay anything in cash, never mind whether it's the plumber or the builder or whatever, at the heart of it, you've got to say to yourself, is there a much bigger moral maze to address? The one of how this money is spent and how people are being taxed. Because, without harping on about this, Phil, the reality is all our taxes are going up massively. Things like VAT, do you remember when that was non-existent and now you pay it up until recently? You're going to pay on a Cornish pasty, for goodness sake. So you have to keep asking yourself, where on earth is all the money going?
Good question, and I'm sure that Dave, the Prime Minister, has a good answer. But nevertheless, there is a question here about tax avoidance and tax evasion. Do you think people are mildly sort of getting a bit inured to it? Because I suppose, the concern is we may end up like Greece, where it becomes almost a sport, not paying tax, and actually that's to the detriment of the country.
Of course it is. And this is why the last time I was fortunately on your programme, Phil, I said what we need is a simplified tax system where, similar to the one that was set up in Hong Kong by a UK civil servant a long time ago, where you have a universal rate of tax. They pay 19%, everybody pays the same, everybody then pays their taxes because they know once they've gone beyond that level, it's theirs. And I think what happens is that people in general are looking for deals. And if their plumber or builder or whatever person says to them, pay me in cash and I'll save you 20%, then that's going to look attractive to people when they're increasingly finding it hard to get by on the money that they've got, what little money they've got. And the other thing, Phil, about all this moralising you've got to remember is that for all of us that are paying these bills, we've paid tax on this money. So how you spend your cash as such is entirely down to you because you've paid income tax, national insurance, and so on all your income. And therefore, I guess people decide, well, how I spend my money is down to me.
Of course. And obviously, you always get paid in cheques rather than cash, so that you can then put it through the books and everything, can't you there, Roddy?
Well, our business is so transparent, Phil, Cone Cougar as an investment business.
Yes.
The Inland Revenue were even considering recently that there was no necessity for us to submit accounts at all. It was that transparent.
Hey, Roddy, there you are.
But I have to tell you a little story. My grandfather, Jack Ayres, used to be very much into casinos, gambling and all sorts of things. He had slot machines, dance halls. This is in Nina in County Tipperary, and I can see why he became a very wealthy man, because at least he worked in businesses where the odds were stacked in his favour of making money.
There you are. But at least if nothing else, HMRC love you, Roddy. Anyway, nice to speak to you. I've got a brush with somebody who's that clean. Take care now. Bye-bye, Roddy. Bye now. Bye. Mr. Transparent himself, Roddy Cohn. And yes, more on that, I'm sure, throughout the evening.